Kelly from Beyond with another bonus track for you today. This one will be a little bit long, so I want to warn you in advance, maybe in case you want to kick me up to 1.5 times speed. I talk fast, but I'm not this fast. Today, I want to talk about when an employee or a candidate asks for an accommodation to work for you. Don't let the word accommodation set you into a panic. If you have an employee or a potential employee who has an ADA or American with Disabilities Act accommodation, these are most often very reasonable and something you can do in order to have a happy and productive staff member. Before I get into the very HR-based practice of working with a person asking for an accommodation, I just want to call something out. It is your responsibility as a human to create a sense of safety for someone who discloses a need to you. This is a moment of vulnerability for them, no matter how strong they are. Be respectful of that and appreciate that they're showing a trust in you and telling you about it. The legal side of this can seem like a lot to navigate, but your responsibility to be in compliance with the ADA is that you need to provide an accommodation as long as it doesn't pose a direct threat to workplace safety or create an undue hardship for the employer. The easiest way to determine if accommodation can be achieved is to look at the job requirements and working conditions. These are generally the two big areas where we can create adjustments. Please remember that disabilities need to remain confidential. We really only need to share with managers and if accommodation has been approved. It's best to engage in what is called an interactive process to comply with the ADA. So I'm going to go through some steps here. Step 1, determine whether the employer is covered by the ADA. The ADA covers anyone with 15 or more employees. Step 2, have a policy and procedure for handling accommodation requests. You can find a sample policy through the Society Human Resource Management or SHRM or any legal counsel you may have. Typically, this process will involve a close look at the job description for essential functions and the physical requirements, which is probably why you've heard from me elsewhere if you've watched any other videos I've done. Why job descriptions are so important. Step 3, initiate the interactive process. Requests do not need to be in writing, nor do they need to specifically reference the ADA. It's a good practice to obtain requests in writing, though I suggest you have the conversation first. By having a conversation, you can remove any confusion and engage in an interactive process from the start. If a disability is not obvious, you can ask about the nature of the disability and the functional limitations in relation to the job. You're also able to request medical documentation to understand the needs in relationship to the job. If you feel you need to interact with a medical professional directly, you will need to obtain a medical release, often referred to as a HIPAA release from your employee. This does not require a healthcare provider to respond to us, even if we have patient consent, and it is not required by the ADA that they do. If this happens, we can ask the employee to seek out another provider who will do so, but this is a rarity. Step 4, assess whether the employee has a disability under the ADA. There's no real list of covered disabilities, and different conditions can be a disability for one person, but not for another. So here are some more specifics. According to the ADA, a person is considered to have a disability if they, 1, have a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits a major life activity, or 2, have a record of a physical or mental impairment that sustainably limited a major life activity, or 3, are regarded as having such an impairment. So a pretty loose definition. Once an employer has determined that an applicant or employee has a disability, they should next consider whether that disability substantially limits the candidate's or the employee's ability to work or meet certain job-related requirements, even though the impairment may not impose substantial limitations outside the workplace. This should not become an exercise in determining whether or not someone has a disability. At this point, you just need to understand if the accommodation is reasonable. Step 5, determine accommodations. So typically, accommodations are a change or a modification to a workplace so a person can perform their essential job duties. Examples can be an equipment or device change, interpreters for people with visual or hearing impairments, adjusting accessibility of facilities, or even reassigning someone. Price can vary widely to meet the accommodations. Sometimes adjusting a work schedule, granting unpaid leave, or offering telecommuting can be free, while others that require changes to a building can have cost. If you have completed medical documentation for an accommodation, it should be pretty specific. If you don't, or it isn't clear to you, this is when you need to engage with the employee. You need to know what they need so you're both in agreement. There is an online tool that can help should both of you be unsure about what is best. It's called askjan.org, askjan.org. Step 6, determine whether the accommodation is reasonable or creates undue hardship. Review the initial request. Does it create undue hardship? When looking at this, you should not just think about cost of the actual request, but probably also the company's financial stability. For example, a $1,000 chair to help with a disability may not be an undue hardship for a multi-million-dollar company, but it could be really tight for a small business or a small nonprofit group. Or if the modification would cause disruption to the ordinary work of the job or business, it may not work. An example here is also a small business may require people to fill multiple roles, and job restructuring may not be an option. This process is really a discussion. If the original request cannot be met by the company, other options need to be discussed. But the end goal is to arrive at an accommodation that will not worsen their condition or cause other problems, and it is something the company can deliver. Step 7, you want to notify the employee you've gotten through the process. Provide them written documentation of what the agreed upon accommodation will be, and that's approved and when we're going to start it. HR should also keep all the records for this process. Step 8 is to review and modify. The above is not all set in stone. It may occasionally need to be reviewed, modified, especially if a condition has changed. Keep in mind also that sometimes conditions are temporary. If an employee has an issue because of an injury like a broken leg, which makes commuting a challenge, and sometimes conditions are permanent, but not serious enough for you to have to make permanent accommodations. In the past, I have worked with team members in both the above examples to make sure we were allowing them to keep performing at a high rate as well as stay safe. For example, I worked in a place where most people commuted via mass transit, subways, buses, that kind of thing. So there was by default a lot of walking. When a staff member had a broken leg, we adjusted her work schedule so she could take a different kind of mass transit that allowed her to walk less, and then she avoided some major traffic issues. We agreed together that once she was all healed, her schedule would go back to normal. I had another employee who had hearing issues in one ear. I didn't even know this until I mentioned I liked the way she had rearranged her desk. She explained it was easier to have the phone on the other side of the desk because of her hearing impairment. However, one time she got an ear infection in her dominant ear, and she really struggled talking on the phone. She really couldn't hear as well at the onset of the infection. We switched some assignments around temporarily and had her focus on doing a lot of data entry and other computer-based work for other people while they managed the phones more. She let us know once she was on the mend and ready to jump back into the mix. So these processes don't always have to be scary. You just have to be able to work with your employee through their needs and do your best to meet them and what those needs are. I have a few sites listed here that can help you dig deeper if you need to. And if you are a SHRM member, a lot of what I just shared is easy to find in their tools. Legal counsel is there for you as well if you need it. And of course, you can feel free to reach out to us here at Violent. Thanks so much, all. See you on the next bonus track.